Welcome to Lakeland Community College. My name is Mary Urbas. I'm the Gallery Director and Exhibition Curator. This is the new exhibition in the gallery, which is called From Woman, and it's Roman numeral 11. This is the 11th incarnation that I've done of this show, which is work created by women, of women, and about women in honor of March, which is International Women's History Month. So we're going to walk through the gallery, have some conversations. I'll tell you a little bit about the art. The show was up from February 25th through March 30th, and I hope you enjoy your journey through the gallery today. We start the tour today. This is a mixed media piece by Cindy Smith, followed by a few pieces by Kathy Mead Scarrett. These are mixed media on canvas. And what was fun about this 6-piece panel is that she gave me an idea of how to display them, but she said I could also then change the organization of them and the design of the format. Here's another Kathy Mead Scarrett piece. Next we have two pieces by artist Susan Krause, which are mixed media on canvas. And then you're going to see a piece by Sandy Schellenberger, which is a textile piece. And what's interesting about it is some of the images and some of the pieces kind of echo the pieces that some of the work that's on the pieces of Susan Krause. So that's it's kind of fun when you see these visual threads that link them to each other. And when I designed the exhibition, I created visual storyline, and pieces are put next to each other for very specific reasons, and sometimes some of the threads in between them are very subtle, and some of them are pretty obtuse and pretty and very obvious. But this is what makes it a challenge to me as the installation designer. Yeah, like I said, these are two more pieces by Susan Krause. Next, we have two mixed media pieces by Sarah Curry. And then as Dan pulls back, you'll see this assemblage art piece by Gwen Waite. And what was fun about this piece are the shadows that it casts, and the shadows and the forms of the metal, which kind of relate to the pieces that you'll see right next to them. So again, I look for visual threads when I put pieces next to each other. The next three pieces are done by Hadley Connor. Hadley is a fellow alumni from the Cleveland Institute of Art. And these are encaustic and silver gelatin prints with acrylic and gold leaf. Okay, now you're seeing a piece by Sharon Pomalives, which is an oil on panel. Then we've got two pieces by Lorelei Scazenta. And then here's a small grouping of pieces by Gwen Waite again. And again, what's fun is if you notice the cast shadows on the wall are what's kind of fun, the way the lights hit the. And again, that's one of those happy accidents when you get something like these unusual, crazy shadows. This is another piece by Lorelei Scazenta. Now next is a kind of a fun wall. These are done by Carrie Gortz. And we started off where I chose the piece in the middle, which was a mixed media piece called Monsters. And she's been doing these fun, crazy monsters made out of fabrics and assemblage and all that. And we talked about an unusual way to present them, just so we didn't have to pin them up on the wall. So she made these houses for them, and then she kind of thought they were kind of fun, and she put two of them together. But what I like about them, and for those of you who know I have a very twisted, macabre sense of humor, not only do they look like houses, to me they look a little like coffins too. And I think that kind of adds to the intrigue of them. And she uses, mixed media and unusual fabrics. It's just really fun stuff. And Carrie has a studio over at the 78th Street Studios. She's up on the second floor. Next is a fabric piece by Janet Frazee Wade. And here we have a monochromatic oil on canvas by Tricia Common. And here's one of Betty Skufka's oil on plexiglass, although this is oil on canvas board. Betty is actually 89 years old, and she paints every day in her studio, and she is an inspiration to me. Okay, the next two pieces are done by Tricia Common. They're both oil on canvas. And then this next piece is an unusual piece. This is lampwork beads. This is Amy Greaves, who's from Phoenix, Arizona. And what she does is she hand blows the flat discs and creates the beads to make them hollow. And then she creates these landscapes and adds different shapes of beads. And actually included with this are African trade beads from Yemen. And she incorporates some linen into it. And actually the part on the top where she attaches it to itself is actually a branding iron that we picked up in the shop when I was visiting her last year in Phoenix. And again, this is one of those pieces that kind of casts some fun shadows on the wall. And the next piece is created by Lisa Rushman. This is antique handmade stained glass that she mosaicked in. So you've got some, antique glass. You've got some copper foiling. The lighthouse actually is placed on top of the glass itself to give it a three-dimensional effect. Okay, now next we have two weavings by Deborah Silver. The first one is called "What If Einstein Had Been a Passenger on the St. Louis? What if he had been turned back? What if he had not come, to the United States? What if he had not arrived?" And Deborah, incorporated barbed wire and images and things that kind of represent, that have very symbolic meaning to her. And this piece here, the next piece is also by Deborah Silver, and this is a tribute to David Bowie. The next wall work is done by Cindy Smith. These are mixed media on panel. And what's fun about how I put these three pieces together, the piece inside, in the middle, is done by Amy Greaves from Arizona. And what was really crazy is some of the beads that she created actually were green and red. And some of the little accents on Cindy's pieces are kind of picked up by the fringe area of Amy's pieces. So again, it was one of those kismet things. When I unpacked Amy's piece and I saw Cindy's work, it was like, oh, it was kind of like, it wasn't rocket science that I would put these together. So like I said, it's kind of fun to see what pieces speak to each other. They have conversations, and I reinforce that by how I place them next to each other in the gallery. Okay, the next piece is a ceramic sculpture piece by Kimberly Chapman. Kimberly is a graduate, got her BFA from the Institute of Art just last year. And this piece kind of deals with the one-child policy in Japan, where the families were only allowed to have one child. And in her artist statement, she feels a little compassion and a little sad for the women who, now that the ban has been lifted, realize that they're too old now to have extra children. So what's interesting about Kimberly's work is she does do social commentary, and there are artist statements available to read about some of the pieces. And then we're going to continue to another Kimberly Chapman piece where she's using found objects of the rocking chair, and she created the ceramic shoes, and this piece is called Gone Girl. And then actually I can't think what the name of those wings are, the base of the rocking chair, she actually cast them out of glass. These next two paintings are created by Bernadette Glorioso. And what's interesting about this work is she actually starts with commercially printed fabric and then superimposes her imagery over top of them. And I like the fact that she incorporates these ornate frames into them, and she said she didn't care that some of the frames had actually been, a little damaged or shop worn. She said it kind of adds to the whole effect of the piece. And again, if you notice the cool shadows underneath the frames, which are creating like a scallop effect around them, a little halo. Okay, this next piece was created by Forlorn Dolls, Samantha Myers. This is probably one of the largest, most ambitious figures I've ever seen her do. It's a mixed media, and Samantha was a graduate of Virginia Marty's School of Fashion Design, so she creates the costumes and the effects and creates the materials for the face and hand paints them. And this is called Friar Giordano Bruno. This next painting is Oil on Panel. This is created by Stanka Kordic. Stanka is another Cleveland Institute of Art fellow alumni. This is another Oil on Board by Sarah Curry. What's kind of interesting about these last two pieces is that they're both kind of showing a dancer. You've got Stanka's piece with a little bit of the essence of the tutu, and then you've got the piece next to it of the dancer and the gestures and the hands and the arms. So again, it's kind of fun to put the different pieces together and put out there the relationships that are visual to them, and sometimes the relationships are not quite as obvious. Okay, the piece on top is created by Laurel Herpold. Laurel has a studio on the West 78th Street complex on the first floor. So this is acrylic on canvas. Below that is another piece of Betty Skufka, which is oil on plexiglass. And again, I'm just so impressed that she's 89 years old and paints every day. What an inspiration she is. And then she also hand paints the frames, so she uses repurposed frames and kind of gilds them up, and everything kind of works together. And she calls her process dotalism, so it's her version of pointillism. And sometimes call her Dot now because of that. Okay, then we've got two more large paintings by Laurel Herbold. And the woman being enticed by the serpent, and then the mermaid kind of washed ashore on a riverbed or lakebed that is drying up. So it's kind of interesting, some of these very surreal compositions and the backstories behind them, or the story that's implied. We have two more pieces by Betty Skufka. And then we have a lovely little snow leopard piece. Okay, we're going to show you some smaller pieces by my installation assistant and gallery assistant extraordinaire, Jamie Zentz. I've asked her in the past few shows to create some smaller pieces for those of us who either don't have the space in our house for her work or maybe can't afford, a large-scale original. But I love Jamie's pieces. I love how surreal they are and the little bits of information that she pulls out of the background. And these are pencil and oil on birchwood. And here's two more pieces, and we sure love those red dots. And what was interesting about this show is, I'd say 90% of the pieces that were purchased were from artists in this show to each other. So I think that kind of says something about the respect the artists have for each other, the love of their artwork, and how they want to collect someone's work and have it in their private collection. Okay, in the center on the pedestals are groupings of mixed media dolls that were created by Joyce Morrow Jones. And these are kind of from her Polynesian series, although there is one from Australia and Aborigine. For those of you who know me well, you know that I have a passion for Hawaii, and I left my heart there in the 80s. And when I met Joyce at the Matchworks building this past December, and a friend of mine told me about this work, they're like, you've got to check out this woman's art, her dolls. And I just thought it would be an interesting and different kind of addition to this collection we put together. And again, how could, and I have such an affinity to the Polynesian and Hawaiian culture that I just, I love what she's doing. Okay, in this corner, and what we're going to be looking at are some pieces by Beth Nash. Beth has been a regular contributor to this show, and she teaches in Southeast Ohio at a university, and these are acrylic on paper and acrylic on wood. And next to that is a pastel of a moth, and this is by Lisa Kenyon. Most of us know Lisa's work as being a sculptor, but she had this piece of the moth, and I knew that the next piece you'll see of Donna Droz had this Vitara kind of insect imagery, and so again, these were visual threads that started showing up, and I just find them fun and intriguing. Now, those of you who will remember Donna Drozda, she was a Cleveland resident. She owned Signet Gallery down in Murray Hill in Little Italy. She was part of the very first resurgence and regentrification of Murray Hill in Little Italy. That's when they first turned it into the art destination and the concentration of art galleries in the schoolhouse, and then the storefronts on the street on Murray Hill and on Mayfield. They started housing and attracting artists and creative entities and creative places. And her pieces are created on awning canvas, and they're put up a little bit informally. These are not, framed and mounted as a traditional piece. And part of this is to help save the cost of shipping, because these were shipped from Virginia. Sometimes it's just easier to roll them up than to send something that's framed under glass. But again, I was intrigued by her pieces and how they honor the animals and the bee tara, where it was kind of like a goddess figure. And then this bronze piece by Lisa Kenyon is interesting because in the texture of the body are beehive cells, are cells from a hive, which is kind of interesting. That's why it's always preferable to come see the exhibition so you can see some of the nuances, because even though I've got an excellent videographer here in Dan Simone. Sometimes you just don't see it unless you see it with your own eyes. Here's another piece of Lisa Kenyon's. This is bronze on a walnut base. And the reason I put her piece next to Susan Schei's is when you look at the imprint on the sculpture, it kind of looks like writing or some kind of symbolic writing. And here we have a piece by Susan Schei. Susan Schei is from Worcester, Ohio. And this is called this is from her Kitchen Tarot series. And this is called The Ten of Spoons, and it talks, Susan is very outspoken. She incorporates political imagery, as you can see. She's got the mayor of San Juan. She's got a solar boat. She's got Mueller up in the corner. She's talking about Putin. She's talking about Obamacare. She's talking about Russia and Trump. So she talks a little bit about everything, but it's all about women's rights and protecting the parks and our place and our water and protecting our immigrants. And what's on the border of the quilt is excerpts from an email she had received when she had written to then President Obama. So she's a journal writer, so you can always go to turtlemoonstudios.com and you can see images of her work, and you'll see the journal entries where she talks about what she was thinking about and talking about what she writes in the background. And the last piece in this room is another bronze piece by Lisa Kenyon, another figurative piece. Okay, the next two paintings you're going to be looking at are by Judy Takis. Judy is also a CIA alumni. This piece is from her ongoing series called Chicks with Balls. And Judy is one of the premier portrait painters, figurative painters in the Cleveland, Northeast Ohio area. This is another one with a dramatic red background and the dogs and the feathers and a little black and white cat. Next we have another piece by Betty Skufka, and what's funny is she comes up with these crazy titles. She's got such a dark sense of humor. You know, this one is called Don't Go Too Near the Edge, You're Not a Mountain Goat, but yet they're mountain goats. So, and some of the patterns she creates, and again, this is another example of how she buys the repurposed frames and then she paints them to coordinate and accentuate the painting itself. These next four pieces, this is a new artist for the collection. Her name is Michaela D'Angelo. These are oil on wood. And I like how she injects a little surrealism with the figures, with some of verbiage and a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of humor in it. And again, these are some pieces where you need to take a minute or two to look at all the details that are incorporated into it. Next we have three more pieces by Jamie Zentz. Again, these are pencil and oil on birchwood. She starts with the wood, and she says that it kind of tells her where to put the figures, who she should put where. And she brings out the background. She brings out the wood grain. And they become very surreal, very dreamlike. And then she also, integrates the figure with beautiful fabric and clothing. And I always told her she should create some fashion designs, some clothing from some of the pieces that she's creating. And again, some of these pieces have just little gems, little pieces, little details that are just maybe are only a half an inch large, but they're just exquisite. Okay, here we have a large-scale drawing by Beth Nash, which is charcoal on paper. And I wanted to include this for a couple of reasons, because most of the times when I've included her work, it has been very colorful and framed on wood with a painted frame, but I just like the, I don't know, the serenity of the monochromatic and the black and white and those little bunnies looking at you. And if you look at them, they kind of have human eyes to them. And she's got her trademark, you know, having the mask on a stick, because, you know, sometimes we put forward a facade and sometimes you don't always know the person behind the mask or the man behind the curtain. This is a oil on canvas painting by Tricia Common. And next to that is an oil on aluminum by Sharon Pomales. And what was fun about this little corner is that we have this piece with the woman with the blanket around her shoulders, and then next to it is a woven piece by Deborah Silver. And it was kind of interesting, if you look at the patterns in her piece, they kind of echo or remind you of the patterning in the blanket that the woman is wearing. So again, it's a challenge as the gallery installation designer to put pieces that kind of work with each other. And I was afraid that the little piece would get lost, but then when I saw Sharon's piece, it was not rocket science, and they were just almost made to be shown next to each other. Then we have this beautiful pastel on ampersand pastel board by Sharon Pomales called Little Girl with a Big Guitar. And we're going to finish off this room with another Sharon Pomales piece, which is oil on canvas. Okay, well now we are out in the hallway area of the gallery. This is another piece by Michaela D'Angelo, and where it's oil and mixed media on wood. We've got two charcoal on paper drawings by Marilyn Zalay. Marilyn used to teach over at Tri-C and over on the east side. She passed away a few years ago, but she was so prolific. I could show 4 pieces of hers every year for probably the next 30 years. And the next piece is actually, the model is Nancy Cintron, Nancy Goodgoat Cintron, who is one of Marilyn's muses and did appear in many of her drawings. Nancy owns a gallery over in Lakewood called the Goodgoat Gallery. Next we have two more pieces by Kathy Mead Scarrett. These are mixed media on canvas. Okay, next we have 2 large format Polaroid prints by Polly Chandler from Austin, Texas. And these pieces were actually inspired by the music of Tom Waits, and some of the titles also reflect some of his song titles. And with a lot of these artists, you can go to their websites, you can find out about them, you can see other work that they do. Sometimes they'll share schedules of places that you can see their artwork up on display. And here we have a suite of 5 black and white prints by Anastasia Pancios, and she is a photographer, obviously. She just wrote a book about women in rock, and she also is a contributor and writer to Cool Cleveland. And again, these are some pieces that are, you know, again, for Women's History Month, you know, I am not an incubator, faster, stronger, healthier, happier. Okay, this next piece, installation piece by Kimberly Chaplin. What she's done is she shows these pictures, these mug shots of women in Australia that were incarcerated, and then the mug shots, which obviously is a play on word, incorporate some of the things that they went to prison for. And some of these women were in prison for very heinous crimes like being an abortionist and being murderers and being drug dealers. And then some of them were just, they were selling liquor illegally. They were, so it's kind of interesting, images and the metaphors that she incorporates into the piece. And the photograph on top shows some of the mug shots of these women. And then some of these actual images were incorporated onto the mugs themselves as decals. Okay, continuing through in the hallway section of the gallery, this is a watercolor pencil on paper by Marie Urbas. Jen is also a CIA graduate, and she is one of the instructors here at Lakeland Community College. She teaches upstairs and teaches drawing. We've got two different kinds of pieces by Anya Khan. Anya gave us a graphite on paper piece of an eyeball, and then she also submitted a piece of photography. And it was called, I Decided It Better to Scream, Silence is the Real Crime Against Humanity. Here's another large format Polaroid print that was then digitally printed on paper by Polly Chandler. And what's interesting is if you look at the image of the house that's incorporated into the goddess, the woman image, and then next to it you're gonna see ceramic houses created by Kimberly Chapman. So again, this was one of those happy accidents. And the other cool thing about the pieces on the shelves is that the really interesting shadows, again, that were created by the lighting, and how the shadows create the peaked forms and reinforces the forms that are in the photography, and reinforces the forms that are part of the ceramic pieces themselves. And the piece on top is done by Hadley Connor. Hadley is another CIA graduate. Her pieces are mixed media and caustic, and she incorporates silver gelatin prints. So she uses a lot of lost art, some age-old techniques that aren't being used so much, because you can't really readily find some of the equipment and some of the materials to do silver gelatin prints. So it's kind of keeping the lost art alive. Here's another piece of Polly Chandler's. And what's interesting is that her pieces are reflected in the background. So when you're looking at this, the pieces that you're seeing in the reflection are actually two of hers also. Next we have two textile pieces by Sandy Schellenberger. And these are screen printed and hand painted, and then she quilts them. And we have two more charcoal drawings, graphite drawings on paper, created by Marilyn Zalay. They're a little bit unusual, but I chose them because of the dolls that the child is holding, because as you saw earlier in the video, I did bring in some doll makers this year. Okay, this is a jewelry case which is dedicated all to the work of Catherine Butler. Catherine Butler is also a CIA alumni. She was a year behind me in school, so I've known Catherine for quite a few years. These top three pieces are rings, and she uses found materials and mixed metals, and then she uses found objects. Like the piece in the center, has a porcelain figurine and a mink tail, and then and then there's a acorn and an oak twig, and then the piece next to it, which is called Disagreeable Dinnering Ring. That's actually the base is her grandmother's sugar bowl, and it contains a gallstone that was removed from Catherine, but it has been cleaned and sterilized for your enjoyment. And the piece underneath it, this piece is called Blue Skies Broken Eggs. It's organic eggshells, acrylic paint, and acrylic resin. I really appreciate the interesting stories that are kind of being translated or being visualized in some of Catherine's pieces. She's always been one to use unusual materials. She injects her kind of a dark sense of humor into her pieces. And again, this is a piece, where it's eggshells with the blue sky and put together with strings. And then on the bottom, these are aluminum wire pieces. The first one on the left is called Feminist Necklace Version 1, and the second one, it says this is what it looks like. This is what a feminist looks like. And the first one says the same thing, but the first one, it would be as if you were wearing it and looking down, so that the wearer could actually read what was being written. And then the third piece is called How Many Times Do We Have to Tell You? And it's all about respect. Okay, this top shelf was created by Laura Lee Hudson. Laura Lee is also a CIA graduate. These are pieces from her Brain Expression series. The one pin, Things I Should Not Say. The second piece is Overthinking It. And these are sterling silver with cloisonné enamel and some with 18-karat gold. The piece in the middle is Early Spring, which depicts, the flower and the organic twig necklace part to it. And then next to that is the pin Look Within, and then the next one is called Lost in Self-Doubt. Okay, this middle shelf has two different artists. The first piece you're going to see is created by Ro Clarkin, and the first one was made out of a recycled cobalt wine bottle, and this is called her Garden Treasure necklace and Garden Treasure earrings. And then the pieces in the middle are created by a Michigan artist named Bonnie Blanford, and these are pieces that are made with sterling silver, 18-karat gold, semi-precious stones set in 14-karat gold, and you can see You can see Bonnie in July at the Boston Mills Arts Festival. She'll have some of her work on display there. She's an annual exhibitor. And then the last piece on the left is another piece by Ro Clarkin, and this is called Sunrise Bloom, and necklace and earring, and this is also a recycled wine bottle that she then adds beading to, and silver solder, copper solder. And on the bottom shelf is a series of work from Catherine Butler called Sea Plastique, and these are recycled plastic parts taken, from what she finds walking on the rivers or walking on the beach at Lake Erie. And it's one of those, it's fun because she's using recycled materials, and she's using these recycled materials to elevate them from trash to something that could be wearable, that makes a statement, that's wearable art and jewelry. So again, it's about artists have a way of elevating a mundane object into a high piece of art, and it's just kind of fun, the different shapes and how she puts them together, and the bracelets and the necklaces. It's It's fun, and it's also indicative of the times of people trying to recycle and repurpose and keep things out of the landfills. We end our day's journey through the gallery with a transparent acrylic piece on paper by Melissa Harris. So thank you again for joining me on this journey through the gallery. Like I said, the show, it was up from February 25th to March 30th. This is a show that I do every year in March, so hopefully you'll join us again next March. And I invite you to visit the gallery homepage on Lakeland Community College's website. So it's lakelandcc.edu/gallery. You can always see what's coming up in our exhibitions and our schedule of events, that kind of thing. And thank you again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the tour.